In a day marked by significant global events, we witness rising tensions in Eastern Europe, a major economic shift in Asia, and a devastating natural disaster in South America. These stories shape our world and affect millions. Here are today's top 10 stories you need to know. A powerful earthquake measuring 7.2 struck off the coast of Ecuador today, sending tremors felt across the region. The epicenter was located 50 kilometers from the city of Manta, leading to significant structural damage in coastal towns. Emergency services reported multiple injuries, although the extent of casualties is still being assessed. Local authorities are urging residents to stay clear of damaged buildings and seek shelter in safer areas. This seismic event adds to the ongoing challenges faced by Ecuador, which has been grappling with economic recovery and infrastructure issues. The government has mobilized rescue teams to assist affected areas, and international aid may soon follow, depending on the scale of destruction. As recovery efforts begin, experts warn of aftershocks, advising the public to remain vigilant in the coming days. In a significant move for regional economies, several Asian nations have signed new trade agreements aimed at boosting economic collaboration. Countries including Japan, South Korea, and Vietnam have committed to reducing tariffs and enhancing trade relations. These agreements are expected to stimulate economic growth, particularly in sectors like technology and agriculture. The recent negotiations reflect a strategic shift towards regionalism as global trade dynamics evolve. Economists anticipate that these partnerships will help mitigate the economic impact of ongoing supply chain disruptions. Experts believe this could lead to increased investments in the region, further enhancing competitiveness on the global stage. As these agreements take effect, businesses are preparing for a shift in market dynamics, and consumers may soon see changes in pricing and product availability. North Korea has conducted a ballistic missile test, launching a projectile into the sea off its eastern coast. This test represents a significant escalation in military tensions occurring amid ongoing diplomatic strains with the West. South Korea and Japan have condemned the launch, characterizing it as a direct threat to their national security and regional stability. The missile reportedly reached a considerable altitude before descending into the water, showcasing North Korea's advancements in missile technology. Analysts suggest that this test is part of North Korea's broader strategy to bolster its military capabilities, particularly as a response to perceived threats from the United States and its allies. The international community is closely monitoring these developments, as they could provoke further sanctions or military responses. With North Korea's missile program advancing rapidly, regional powers may need to reassess their security strategies to address the growing threat effectively and collaboratively in the coming months. Severe flooding has struck Brazil's southeastern region, particularly affecting the state of São Paulo. This disaster follows an unusually intense rainy season, exacerbated by climate change, which has led to overflowing rivers, displacing thousands, and causing widespread destruction. Emergency services are in a race against time to rescue those trapped and provide aid to affected communities. The government has declared a state of emergency, in mobilizing resources to assist families impacted by the floods. Local officials report that infrastructure has been severely damaged, with roads and bridges washed away, complicating rescue efforts. The agricultural sector is also at risk, as flooded fields threaten crops and livestock. Residents have been urged to evacuate to higher ground as the situation evolves. The Brazilian government is coordinating with international aid organizations to provide necessary support. As recovery efforts continue, the long-term impacts on the economy and environment are becoming a major concern, with rebuilding expected to take months, if not years, to complete. Sudan is facing escalating political turmoil as protests continue against the military government. Demonstrators are demanding a return to civilian rule following a coup last year that upended the transitional government, which had aimed to steer the nation towards democracy. The protests have gained momentum, with citizens from various sectors, including teachers and healthcare workers, joining in solidarity against military rule. The military response has been increasingly aggressive, resulting in clashes that have left several injured and raised concerns about human rights violations. International organizations, including the United Nations, have condemned the violence and called for restraint from both the government and the protesters. The situation remains fluid, with the potential for further unrest as public discontent grows due to economic hardships and lack of basic services. Analysts warn that without a resolution, Sudan could see a deepening crisis that threatens regional stability. Diplomatic efforts are underway, but the path to peace remains uncertain as citizens demand accountability and a genuine transition to democracy. In response to ongoing military aggression, the European Union has announced further economic sanctions on Russia. These newly imposed measures specifically target critical sectors, including energy and finance, aiming to diminish Russia's capacity to fund its military operations in Ukraine. This announcement comes against the backdrop of heightened tensions and continued conflict, as Russia's actions have drawn widespread condemnation from the international community. European leaders hope that these restrictions will apply enough pressure on the Kremlin to reconsider its aggressive stance. However, analysts caution that the economic fallout could also ripple through European economies, particularly those heavily reliant on Russian energy imports. The balance between robust support for Ukraine and maintaining economic stability within Europe remains precarious. Additionally, businesses are bracing for challenges as they navigate the evolving sanctions landscape, which could disrupt trade and investment flows. As the situation continues to unfold, it is imperative for European nations to develop strategies that not only bolster Ukraine, but also ensure their own economic resilience in the face of prolonged conflict. New economic data reveals that China's growth rate has slowed significantly, raising concerns among global investors. The latest reports indicate that GDP growth has dipped to its lowest point in over a decade, attributed to ongoing supply chain disruptions and a decline in consumer spending. This downturn highlights the repercussions of stringent COVID-19 lockdowns and a real estate market slump, both of which have curtailed domestic demand. The impact of China's economic slowdown extends beyond its borders, threatening to disrupt global supply chains and affecting countries heavily reliant on Chinese exports, such as Australia and Germany. Analysts suggest that the Chinese government may need to implement stimulus measures to revive growth and regain investor confidence. Such measures could include increased infrastructure spending and tax incentives to boost consumer spending. As the world's second-largest economy navigates these challenges, the international community is closely monitoring the potential for a protracted economic downturn. Future economic policies and reforms will be critical in determining China's trajectory, particularly as it seeks to stabilize growth in the coming months. Tensions have escalated once again in the Israel-Palestine conflict, with violent clashes reported in several areas of the West Bank. Israeli forces conducted targeted operations against militant groups, which ignited widespread protests among Palestinians. The Palestinian authorities condemned these actions, labeling them a gross violation of human rights and an affront to their sovereignty. This escalation follows a series of violent incidents, including recent attacks and retaliations that have further strained relations between the two sides. The international community is increasingly alarmed, with countries urging both Israel and Palestinian leaders to de-escalate tensions and seek diplomatic solutions. The prospect of a broader conflict looms large, particularly with ongoing hostilities and stalled peace talks that leave little room for negotiation. The humanitarian situation is deteriorating, with civilians caught in the crossfire facing dire consequences. As the violence continues, global leaders are being called upon to intervene and facilitate dialogue. With the situation evolving rapidly, there is a pressing need for renewed efforts towards peace, as the cycle of violence threatens to engulf the region further. A concerted diplomatic push may be the only way to avert a larger crisis. The United States is grappling with unprecedented inflation rates, which have surged to record highs. New Consumer Price Index data reveals that inflation has reached levels not seen in over 4 decades. This dramatic rise in prices is primarily driven by the escalating costs of essential goods and services, such as food, fuel, and housing, straining household budgets. The surge in inflation is attributed to various factors, including ongoing supply chain disruptions, increased consumer demand as the economy rebounds from the pandemic, and geopolitical tensions that have caused energy prices to soar. As a result, economists warn that these persistent inflationary pressures could undermine consumer purchasing power and lead to a potential economic slowdown. The Federal Reserve finds itself under intense pressure to implement measures to stabilize the economy. However, potential interest rate hikes could further impact borrowing costs for consumers and businesses, potentially stifling growth. As policymakers deliberate on solutions, public anxiety regarding financial stability and future economic conditions is palpable. Many families are forced to reconsider their spending habits in light of rising prices. Moving forward, experts suggest that careful monitoring of inflation trends will be crucial in guiding effective policy decisions and restoring consumer confidence in the economy. The situation in Ukraine has dramatically escalated as Russian forces have intensified their military operations. Reports indicate that heavy fighting is taking place in multiple regions, particularly around key cities such as Kharkiv and Mariupol. This intensification of hostilities has resulted in significant civilian casualties, with many families forced to flee their homes, creating a dire humanitarian crisis. International organizations estimate that millions are now displaced, facing shortages of food, water, and medical supplies. The international community has responded with heightened condemnation, and new sanctions against Russia are being considered, aimed at crippling its economy further. Ukrainian officials have called for increased military aid from Western allies, emphasizing the urgent need for support to defend their sovereignty. The conflict has implications that extend beyond Ukraine, as the potential for a larger regional conflict grows, raising alarms across Europe regarding security and stability. Neighboring countries are preparing for possible influxes of refugees and potential spillover violence. Global leaders are closely monitoring developments, and discussions around diplomatic resolutions remain ongoing. The coming days will be critical in determining the trajectory of the conflict, as both sides appear entrenched in their positions. As military engagements escalate, the urgency for effective diplomatic intervention becomes increasingly evident, underscoring the need for a cohesive international strategy to prevent further escalation and promote lasting peace in the region. Thank you for watching. Which of these stories shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates.